Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. Act 1. The play opens with two Capulet servants discussing their hatred for the Montagues. They encounter Montague servants, leading to a brawl that Benvolio tries to stop, but Tybalt's arrival escalates the fight. The brawl grows into a large street fight involving both Lord Montague and Lord Capulet, until the prince intervenes, threatening death to anyone who disrupts the peace again. After the crowd disperses, Lord and Lady Montague discuss their missing son Romeo with Benvolio, who later learns that Romeo is heartbroken over unrequited love for Rosaline. Paris asks Lord Capulet for Juliet's hand in marriage, but Capulet thinks she's too young and suggests waiting 2 more years. However, he invites Paris to woo Juliet at an upcoming ball and sends a messenger to invite other guests. The messenger encounters Romeo and Benvolio and informs them about the ball, mentioning that Rosaline will attend. Benvolio persuades Romeo to go to the ball to find a new love, but Romeo agrees only to prove that Rosaline is the most beautiful. Scene 3. Lady Capulet and the nurse try to convince Juliet that Paris is a good marriage match, praising him as the finest in Verona. The nurse reminisces about Juliet's childhood, expressing her wish to see Juliet happily married to Paris. Both women are eager for Juliet to consider Paris as a suitor. Scene 4. Romeo, Mercutio, and Benvolio head to the ball, but Romeo hesitates due to his depression over Rosaline and an ominous dream. Mercutio dismisses Romeo's concerns with his Queen Mab speech, arguing that dreams are meaningless. Eventually, Romeo agrees to attend the ball. Scene 5. As the Capulet household prepares for the ball, Tybalt is angered by Romeo's presence and wants to confront him, but Lord Capulet stops him, intensifying Tybalt's anger and desire for revenge. Meanwhile, Romeo meets Juliet, and they share a kiss before discovering each other's identities, leading Juliet to lament, "My only love sprung from my only hate." Act 2. Scene 1. Romeo climbs over the garden wall into the Capulet's grounds. Mercutio and Benvolio try to look for him, but eventually give up, saying, "Go then, for 'tis in vain, to seek him here that means not to be found." Scene 2. Romeo watches Juliet at her window, comparing her to the sun. Hearing her speak about him, he reveals himself, and they confess their love, with Juliet asking for a vow of commitment. Interrupted by the nurse, they hurriedly decide to meet the next day to arrange their marriage. Scene 3. Friar Lawrence collects herbs for his medicines and potions when Romeo arrives to ask for his help in marrying Juliet. Initially skeptical, because Romeo recently professed love for Rosaline, Friar Lawrence questions Romeo's sudden change of heart. However, he ultimately agrees, hoping the marriage will end the feud between the families. Scene 4. Mercutio and Benvolio search for Romeo, revealing that Tybalt has challenged him to a duel. When Romeo arrives in a cheerful mood, they tease him about his improved spirits. The nurse then enters, and Romeo assures her of his sincere intentions, asking her to tell Juliet to visit Friar Lawrence that afternoon for their marriage. Scene 5. Juliet anxiously waits for the nurse to return with news from Romeo, frustrated by the delay. When the nurse finally arrives, she teases Juliet by withholding the information. Eventually, the nurse tells Juliet to visit Friar Lawrence for her marriage to Romeo, noting Juliet's excitement. Scene 6. Romeo and Juliet secretly meet at Friar Lawrence's cell, where he blesses their union, saying, "So smile the heavens upon this holy act." The friar then leads them off stage to quickly perform the marriage ceremony, instructing them not to be alone until they are married. Act 3. Scene 1. Benvolio warns Mercutio to go indoors as the Capulets are looking for a fight. When Tybalt confronts Romeo, now his kinsman by marriage, Romeo refuses to fight, expressing his love for Tybalt. A scuffle ensues between Mercutio and Tybalt, resulting in Mercutio's fatal stabbing after Romeo intervenes. As Mercutio dies, he curses both the Capulet and Montague families, crying, "A plague o' both your houses." In retaliation, Romeo kills Tybalt. Upon arrival, the prince declares Romeo's exile as punishment for Tybalt's death. Scene 2. Impatiently awaiting Romeo after their secret marriage, Juliet anxiously calls for him to hurry. However, the nurse arrives with news of Tybalt's death, leading Juliet to initially curse Romeo's name. Realizing her duty to stand by her husband in times of trouble, Juliet laments her brief time with him and resolves to support him. The nurse agrees to deliver a message to Romeo on Juliet's behalf. Scene 3. Romeo receives the news of his banishment at Friar Lawrence's cell, expressing despair over being separated from Juliet, equating exile with torture. The nurse arrives with reassurance that Juliet still loves him, prompting the friar to advise Romeo to flee to Mantua until tensions in Verona subside. Urging Romeo to visit Juliet to comfort her and consummate their marriage, the friar instructs him to depart for her chamber. Scene 4. Paris seeks Juliet's hand in marriage from Lord Capulet, who initially hesitates due to the recent grief in the family. However, Capulet changes his mind and sets the wedding date for Thursday, instructing Paris to prepare Juliet for the ceremony before going to bed. Scene 5. Romeo and Juliet bid farewell, expressing their love and commitment to each other. Lady Capulet interrupts, informing Juliet of her arranged marriage to Paris, which Juliet adamantly refuses. Lord Capulet threatens to disown Juliet if she doesn't comply, prompting Juliet to seek advice from Friar Lawrence, despite the nurse's attempts to persuade her otherwise. Act 4. Scene 1. Paris visits Friar Lawrence to discuss his upcoming wedding to Juliet, unaware that Juliet is already there. After Paris leaves, Juliet reveals her desperation to avoid marrying him, even threatening to kill herself. The friar proposes a plan for Juliet to take a potion that will simulate death, allowing her to escape the marriage. He intends to inform Romeo of the plan so he can rescue Juliet from the Capulet tomb. Scene 2. Juliet apologizes to her father, who is delighted and decides to advance the wedding to the next day, expressing his happiness that Juliet has reconciled with him. Scene 3. Forced by the moved wedding day, Juliet takes the potion a night early, briefly fearing it may be poisoned to conceal her marriage to Romeo. Despite her concerns, she consumes it and quickly falls into a death-like state. The Capulets prepare for the wedding. Scene 5. The nurse, Lady Capulet, Lord Capulet, and Paris discover Juliet's lifeless body one after the other, prompting Lord Capulet to repurpose the wedding preparations for her funeral. Juliet's body is then taken to the Capulet family tomb. Act 5. Scene 1. Devastated by Balthazar's news of Juliet's death, Romeo defies fate and purchases poison from an apothecary before returning to Verona to visit Juliet's tomb. Scene 2. Friar John informs Friar Lawrence that he was unable to deliver the message to Romeo about Juliet's simulated death, due to a quarantine in Verona. Worried about the consequences, Friar Lawrence hurries to the Capulet tomb, realizing the potential danger of Romeo's unawareness. Scene 3. Paris visits Juliet's tomb to mourn her death, but encounters Romeo, resulting in a fatal confrontation where Romeo inadvertently kills Paris. Romeo then takes poison and dies beside Juliet's body. Friar Lawrence arrives just as Juliet awakens, but she refuses to leave with him. After Friar Lawrence flees in fear, Juliet takes Romeo's dagger and kills herself. The prince discovers the tragic scene, and Lord Montague arrives, revealing Lady Montague's death due to grief over Romeo's exile. The feud between the Capulets and Montagues ends, as they agree to reconcile in the wake of the devastating losses.